Story 1. Going to a wedding for a friend of my wife. The groom had 4 groomsmen who all danced, drank, and sang together on the dance floor. That is when I realized I no longer have those kinds of friends, and it was just me. Story 2. My dad died a couple of years ago, and the turnout at his funeral was huge. I realized that if I died, I would have a private ceremony kind of funeral because no one outside my family and maybe 1 or 2 other people would come. Story 3. I was alone on a chairlift skiing. The chair in front was loaded with buddies having a great time, and I realized that as much as I tell myself I like skiing alone, I do not have anyone to do it with anyway. Story 4. Texted, called, and continually tried to make arrangements for a Christmas drink, a birthday meal, or just a general hangout. Always rejected with little to no excuse, no matter the time, location, or event. After a couple of years of this, I stopped trying and have not heard from any of my friends since. It hurts the most when there is a band in town that I know they would like to see or a new movie out they would love. I even tried joining one of those meet new friends groups, but it was too awkward and unnatural. So I no longer bother and just do things by myself. Story 5. 42 years old here. Last August, I had a sudden realization that I had spent 10 years focusing on my career and family and had barely spent time with anyone since my wedding. I am slowly rectifying this year by reconnecting with school and village friends from over 20 years ago. Story 6. I had a son and realized I did not have anyone I could ask to be his godfather. It is a daily gut punch. Story 7. Male, United Kingdom, 51. I'm learning the hard way that I'm on my own, and nobody cares. Don't get me wrong. I'm not depressed. I'm just catching on and a little disillusioned. That's all. I meet regulars in my pub, and even though we've been hanging out for years, we're not friends. We'll chat, we'll laugh, and we'll watch the game or the race or whatever. But when it's all over, we're no closer than before. I've got old university friends I've known for more than 30 years. We've been through a lot together and had many great times. But, for example, when I invited them to my town for the first Formula One race of the year like in the old days, I had beers and snacks sorted, and had cooked a nice lasagna. One of them bailed with no notice on the day he was due to arrive. I spoke with another on the phone and agreed we should just reschedule. The sting in the tail is that I invited that guy round for the Monaco Grand Prix. Same deal, beers, snacks, pubs, chat like old times, and he said he'd let me know closer to the time, but then he didn't say anything and just let the event pass. Just last night, I asked a friend I'd known for more than 40 years if he was still free to hang out when I was back in town this weekend, and he told me he was no longer free. I asked him today what had gone wrong. Did his plans really change at short notice? Did I miss a chance to confirm things or what? And he just hasn't replied. Bless him. My mother is still alive, and I am very grateful for that. But I'm estranged from my brother, and although I get on well with my sister, she never actively calls me, and I don't see her often. To top it all, although I get on well with my ex when it comes to texting and staying in touch via social media, when she was in town from overseas for a few weeks, she found it very easy to switch plans on me at the last minute, to overestimate my age by a few years when it was my birthday, and to let me attend a garden party but not actually talk to me while I was there, leaving me surrounded mostly by strangers or people whom I'd met when we were an item but who had now forgotten my name. It's also barbecue season, and several birthdays have passed in my social network, and I can't help but notice I'm just not getting invited to anything anymore. I still like my hobbies. Keeping fit, having fun, socializing. I still like beers, playing networked PC games, and getting the banter going. But I've noticed it's me who keeps making the effort. I'm also noticing that even if I do make an effort, people seem free to sideline me or blow me off in ways they never did before and in ways I would never do if the shoe were on the other foot. It's not depressing, but it's dispiriting. I am on my own, and no one cares. Story 8. 54 years old. Spent the last 25 years taking care of family and providing for them. Major events in life that I could not rely on my wife for made me realize that outside of my sister, there is no one on earth I can trust or rely on. I am providing housing and care for my 3 adult children, my wife, and my 90-year-old father-in-law. It is strange to reach this age and have no one you can rely on while simultaneously having so many people rely on you. Story 9. Had no one I felt like calling when I started having issues in my relationship. Everything turned out fine, but that was an eye-opener. Story 10. When I decided to wait and see how long it took for my friends to call me, and not me calling them, it was about 4 years and still going. Anyway, life is good with family. Story 11. I am 46 now, and I don't know who I can talk to anymore when it comes to topics where my wife isn't the ideal partner or just to hang out without using a social filter. I had 3 close friends since I was 15, and I was the best man for 2 of them. But somehow, since the COVID-19 pandemic, everything changed. It felt like, from one day to the next, they weren't really trying to get in touch anymore. I chose to ask them directly that I missed them and that I didn't actually understand what happened to our friendship. The answer was kind of anticlimactic and similar from all 3 of them. They said life happened. They focused on family alone, and then I realized that I saw them as chosen family members, but they don't. I know that they are good people and that there isn't a specific reason. They just chose to reduce their circle and I wasn't in it. From that day on, something broke in me. We see each other on occasions like birthdays and I am happy to see them, but I am not able to open up to them like I did in the past. I stopped sharing my bad and good days with them. I love my little family, but it doesn't give me the same relief I have when I talk to or hang out with old friends. I actually feel bad about it because other friends seem to be satisfied just to keep their circles small. I am good, but I just miss them. Story 12. Not in my 40s, but at one point, I had a very active social life with many circles and a career that enabled me to help people with their projects and facilitate connections. Then, my relationship ended. I was abruptly relieved from my job. A family member died by suicide, and I had an injury that left me bedridden for months. My career took a nosedive, followed by financial ruin and ensuing depression. All of this happened within a little over a year. Once I was no longer able to help people and instead needed help and support, those circles became scattered dots. There were no check-ins or opportunities to get out of the rut. Only shrugs and isolating stares. Changed my outlook. Now, I am not nearly as social, trusting, or happy. I went from collaborator to hermit. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for taking what you needed. Story 13. I started a job where I work independently. It is just me, my earbuds, and various podcasts or radio shows. Then I realized how much I enjoy my own company, and this carried over to my personal life. Now I strive to live a drama-free life. Story 14. Just turned 50, and all my friends either moved away or we stopped hanging out throughout my 40s. I did not replace any, and now I only have a few acquaintances from hobbies. I saw a quote on a social media platform a long time ago that went something like, "Be nice to your brother or sister. He or she is the only friend you will have when you get old." Story 15. I have to move something heavy, like furniture, and I don't have anyone to ask because I don't want to feel like I am overstepping. Story 16. My wife asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday, and I couldn't think of anything. She suggested I go out with my friends for a night and go to a concert, bar hop, baseball game, or whatever. Basically, take a night off from being a dad and just do whatever. I couldn't think of a single person I could invite who wasn't related to me or a work friend. I'm not sad about it or anything. My wife and kids are my favorite people in the world, so I prefer to spend time with them when I have it. It's just weird. 15 years ago, my social life was everything. If the weekend rolled around and I didn't have something lined up, I'd be devastated. It's been so long since I had a night out, I don't even think about it anymore. Story 17. Warhammer nearly broke me. I got back into it at 41 last year. I had been uncertain with my friends up to that point, but the amount of focus I put into painting since then made my world very small indeed. My partner noticed and said, "You really need people to talk to about this stuff and play with." I was brave and found a local gaming group that I have been playing with for a few months now. It has quietly changed my life. Once I made a few connections with like-minded people, my other social connections reignited too. Story 18. I am 40 this year. I wanted to go out for a couple of drinks at the bar, but realized I do not really have anybody to call anymore. Story 19. Late 30s, but relatable. I had some medical news, and after getting home, I picked up my cell phone and started scrolling to see who I should tell. I found out there was nobody to tell. Story 20. I would like to add an opposing view to what many people are saying about how if they don't put in the effort to call or text, they go a long time without hearing from others. Life is hard and gets in the way of what most people would rather spend their time doing. Along with people getting married, going through divorces, starting new jobs, having children, and moving around the country, it is easy to see why relationships can drift apart. Be the one to put in the effort and keep things going during tough and changing times. Obviously, not to extremes, but you can be the person to maintain connections and keep friendships alive. I put a lot of effort into maintaining my friendships, and it truly is a lot of work to spend time with everyone and keep reaching life milestones. In almost all my friendships, I do the majority of the communicating, but I do not mind. I had a friend who went off to university before me and did not speak to me for a year because he was having so much fun. I basically considered the friendship over, which was sad since we had been best friends. However, he contacted me after a year and apologized for what he did. Now, 10 years later, we are stronger than ever. I would hate to be the person who rejected his apology out of pride. Story 21. When I deleted Instagram, my phone went silent. No calls, no texts. I live in the middle of the woods. Once I am home, I am alone. Sometimes it gets too quiet and then I have emotions. But I go to bed, wake up, and start over. I try to stay busy to forget that no one remembers I exist. Story 22. When I realized I was sharing too much with coworkers because I did not have people in my friends group to talk to about day-to-day matters. Story 23. They were only friends and in contact when their life was going poorly. I simply realized that without them, it was the same as it had always been but without the drama. Not that times had not been fun in the past, but at some point you realize they were latching onto your life, not the other way around. Oddly comforting, though it adds some loneliness for sure. Happily married to my best friend. However, it works out. Story 24. 34-year-old male. If I am not the one to reach out, no one will reach out to me. It has always been like that, even when I was a teenager. When I was busy with study or working night shifts in my early 20s, I would not hear from anyone for weeks, not even my parents or siblings. My conclusion is to keep reaching out to a selected few. It is better than being alone all the time. Story 25. I don't need friends. I have 5 children, a wife, and a people-facing job. I have more than enough social interaction. I just want to hit golf balls, have no one speak to me, and my phone not ring. Story 26. When I stopped initiating contact, the contact stopped entirely. I got tired of being the only one reaching out, so I stopped, and they never started. Story 27. When I left my garage door open after driving out of town, I had to ask a coworker to close it for me. Also, I bought a new car and had no one I really wanted to show it to. Story 28. I put some furniture together and realized I had no one I could call to come over and help me move it. Story 29. I am in my 40s and I have not drifted away from my friends because I have devised a system. I have a spreadsheet of friends and make sure I contact each of them weekly, monthly, or quarterly depending on how close we are. It works, and I either have a nice catch-up call or we actually meet up and hang out. Story 30. I am a 35-year-old male. My college friend group has a scheduled friends night out on a set weekend every summer. If not for that, we would probably never see each other. Story 31. I spent 30 years working 6 or 7 days a week while raising kids. The last couple of years, my company eliminated all overtime. Now I have every weekend off, but I have nothing to do because I lost touch with my friends while working night shifts, working 6 and 7 days a week, and raising a family. I also moved about an hour away from where all my friends lived. Now I am divorced, my kids are grown, and I have nothing to do on the weekends except when they come over to visit. I forgot to mention I am 62, so a bit older. I started losing touch with my friends in my 40s. Story 32. They never drifted away. I just never had any. I have always preferred talking to women and befriending them. However, most women are very guarded by the question, "What are your intentions?" It is a lonely world, but it is nothing I am not used to at this point. Story 33. The last few times we hung out, we had less and less in common. It is down to basically nothing but shared experiences from over 20 years ago. It took a while, but I have realized that most of them were in my world due to geography as children. As adults, we are all very different people. Story 34. I used to be in a fraternity in college. 20 years later, I do not talk to any of them. I am glad I have an older brother who is basically my best friend, next to my wife, of course. Story 35. When my wife wanted to separate, it has been a very lonely time. Not knowing who to talk to or having to go through it alone is really difficult. Story 36. When my wife and I separated, I became ill and realized that if I died, it would be nearly a week until my body was found. Story 37. Honestly, a few weeks ago, I was sitting there thinking about my different friendships and talking to my wife about them, and it hit me. I don't feel completely alone, but I do feel unfulfilled. I do not have a single friendship or group of friends in my life where I feel like I can really be my unabashed true self. Now, I'm not talking about being emotionally raw and completely vulnerable because I don't know how to do that with another man. But all the things I like to do, watch, play, listen to, and just generally vibe out on. Like many of us at this point, I have pockets of friends. Sports friends, nerdy friends with subgroups, tech friends, anime friends, Disney friends, and so on. Sure, there is some crossover in the groups, and I can talk about things and connect with them, but it's all still pretty surface level. A couple of times in my life, I did have that close feeling with some guys, but in the end, it all turned out to be worthless, and I quietly backed away. COVID changed a lot of things. I feel lonely in the sense that I can't share my passions and interests fully with one person or group and have that excitement be matched or at least understood. I joke about being dead inside because of how I was brought up. Immigrant parents, no time for emotions, stuff it down and move on. But when I get excited about things, I get excited. And I don't have anyone who gets as excited, at least not friends. It's also really disheartening when you are the one in the group trying to get the others together and things never happen. This then turns into, well, forget them. I'm done trying. I'm actually developing a really interesting and cool relationship with our son. He's been showing interest in my things, gaming, Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, anime, to name a few. But even there, I temper my excitement because he's 11, and it's not cool to be overly excited about things. I'm okay with that because I'm meeting him where he is. But I digress. Yes, we have the internet, Reddit, Discord, and all these places to connect with like-minded people, but it's not the same. The bigger question is, what do we do to fix it? I don't like feeling lonely, and I know having close connections will help me be a better husband and dad. However, now I feel like if I try to establish that close circle, I'm going to burn myself out or feel even more depressed when it doesn't pan out. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. This was a good ask, even if I want to now grab a couple of shots to numb the pain that was brought up typing this out. Story 38. This happened around or just after 30, but I think it counts. I was at a Super Bowl party with many people. It was pretty big and I knew most of them. The night turned into drinking games, loud music, and hanging out. I had a moment of sober clarity, looked around at all these friends, and realized two things. One, if I just left, no one would notice. So I left and started to walk about 5 miles home. I don't see these people unless we are drinking. These two things made me reevaluate what friendship meant to me. We only got together when drinking. No one would notice if I wasn't there. Everything would move right along without me. Were we even friends or just convenient drinking buddies? I knew they liked me, but in reality, to what extent? Story 39. Wow, shaking my head. Reading this post, I guess. I don't think I've talked to anybody I would consider a friend in months, and not even my family in 6 weeks. I thought I was fine, but now I am just really down. Weird. I am sociable and friendly. Well, thanks. Geez, time to evaluate some things. Story 40. Moving back to the hometown and reconnecting with friends from high school made me realize how much I have changed and how different I have become from when we used to be best friends. In doing so, it became much harder to relate to them. This does not apply to all of them. Most who never left our hometowns seemed like they had not changed much at all, had not grown or reflected much, and still made the same tired stereotype jokes as when we were 15. Our humor, values, and interests have become so different over 20 years that we could not easily talk or connect. I felt resentment from them about my having left town, which they never expressed to me when it happened. My life since then has been about experiencing new things, new challenges, and developing relationships of all types. I could not fathom that these were the same people. As kids, their perspectives were reasonable, thoughtful, and caring. Now they seem to have become fearful, antagonistic, and spiteful, embracing the hateful xenophobia that is being stoked in my country. Maybe it is just being from the Midwest, but that was my experience, realizing how many of my old friends embraced such toxic standards and values of masculinity, labor, and economics. Story 41. I was on a long road trip and wanted to call some people to pass the time. I realized I only had 2 friends I could call without the awkward, I haven't talked to you in years. What's up? Story 42. When I split with my ex, friends I had since high school never asked me what happened or if I was okay. They rallied around my ex, and I put myself into therapy to manage my depression. A couple of years later, I changed my life entirely, made an entirely new circle of friends, and started over. Now I travel full-time, am completely comfortable being alone with my thoughts, and I still have not heard from any of them. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. Story 43. I realized in my early 30s that my friends were not very good, and I made new friends who were also not very good, but in a different way. As I have gotten older, I have stopped trying as hard to maintain relationships. Story 44. Former avid gamer, now using it sparingly to unwind and relax whenever the opportunity arises. I saw some games I thought would be fun to play until I realized I would play them alone. Now I focus on single-player games. Story 45. I moved to a new state during the COVID-19 pandemic and have not built any connections here yet. I am not unknown in the community. People greet me by name at the gas station and grocery store because of my job. However, I have not developed any friendships. I just started attending a Dungeons & Dragons night at a game store with my son last week, and I am going to try to make friends with some of the other dads. Story 46. I was applying for a job that was only voluntary, and they wanted 2 people who were not relatives as references. I realized I have no one in my life who has known me longer than about 6 months on and off. I ended up using a former boss from a job a decade ago and a work coach from a place the job center referred me to. It was not just about drifting from friends. It was more about being a Jehovah's Witness for a few years, then leaving, and having a wife who was barely able to leave the house, so we were rarely able to go out together. Now I have lost my wife and have no friends. It is pretty tough at times. The kids help, though. Story 47. I threw my wife a surprise party this year. I invited many of her friends and our friends. There was a big turnout, about 30 people. She tried organizing a surprise dinner for my birthday but could only get about 10 people to attend. Of those 10, 7 were her friends and their boyfriends, whom I basically never talked to. Only 3 were my friends. Of those 3, 1 I had not seen or talked to in 2 years. It stung a bit as reality set in. I ended up telling her to cancel it. I got married 2 years ago and had a hard time filling 5 groomsmen spots. One of my groomsmen made an excuse about his job to bail on my wedding to go on a week-long fishing trip with his girlfriend. I was the one who took them both fishing for the first time and taught them how the year before. Needless to say, I don't talk to them anymore. Story 48. COVID-19 revealed some character flaws that were unacceptable to me in some individuals, and the current political options in the United States revealed flaws in others. However, I discovered some new positive qualities as well, and I am not alone. Story 49. This moment right now. I am sitting alone in a quiet room while 200 people mingle and do fun activities together. It is a company meeting for mostly remote employees. I am the new person dealing with years of mental health challenges and have lost any meaningful friendships along the way. Meanwhile, I am spiraling and beginning to feel remarkably less than. Only 6 hours to go. Story 50. I realized it when I was 24 and graduated. After school, nobody stayed in touch. I tried to be the initiator for a while but gave up. Now I am 37 and still do things by myself. I feel alone, but what other choice do I have than to grit my teeth and deal with it? Story 51. I still keep in contact with my 3 close friends from high school regularly over Facebook Messenger chat, but I had many more friends before. They usually joined different friend groups, got married, or moved to other states. There was no single moment when we drifted apart. One regular friend cheated with my ex. One, who was like an older brother to me, moved to Texas and became involved with the MAGA movement. One now works at the airport but, for his own reasons, is reluctant to talk to me. The three I regularly talk to now may want to hang out, but it's tough. One lives in a bigger city 4 hours away and is always busy with his wife. One has a new girlfriend, and when that happens, usually all his time goes there. The third recently lost his mother. To be fair, I usually have family matters going on too. My wife's family is first-generation Mexican, and there is always a graduation, birthday, quinceañera, or other event. Coordinating something with my friends can sometimes feel like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Story 52. It's not really over. I've moved a lot, and there's always a chance you'll make a new great friend well into old age. I've made friends with some older men. I've had falling outs, and there were friends I hoped I'd be close with, but we drifted apart because they were looking for something else or whatever, and that sucks. There's nothing you can do. It's over whenever you want or never if you keep putting yourself out there. Just go to a bar. If you don't make friends with someone who cares, one day you might. Or you might get lucky or just have a nice conversation with an older couple about a crazy video you both saw on the internet or whatever. If you want loyalty, get a dog. Story 53. I used to try to visit my former college roommates every couple of years and would message them periodically. Over time, I was more and more the one initiating contact. One day, I decided to stop initiating to see if they would message me without a nudge. I am still waiting years later. Story 54. After the second failed attempt at having a relationship, I realized I had no one to talk to about it. At the same time, I have always been alone, so it does not feel that strange, if that makes sense. Story 55. If it helps this subreddit, my friend group is in the process of breaking up. 2 of my friends tried to plan a boys' weekend this summer. The problem is the guy leading it has just been unpleasant for the last few years, always difficult but nothing terrible. The financial differences between some of my friends are vast. So the guys interested in going are annoyed that the others don't want to join. The ones who don't want to go have valid reasons or just don't want to spend that much money to hang out with someone who has been difficult. Everyone is angry at everyone else. To the guy who worried that if he died none of his friends would show up, I'll just say when my dad passed, all the boys called or came to the funeral to offer support, even the ones I hadn't been talking to. People will show up because they will miss you, even if they haven't been in your life. They just need a reason to remember. Story 56. When I experienced a mental health crisis and needed someone to call, I had nobody. It is tough out there when the paths of life are so different. Story 57. Ran into an old friend at the gym the other day. He mentioned a high school reunion coming up. I have lots of new friends, including a couple of coworkers I like. It made me miss my old days, but I would rather run into old friends now and update them on things they do not know, like my wife, our trips, and my son. I disconnected from social media years ago, and I think that helps a lot with not feeling lonely. It is nice to run into people and not know everything about them, if that makes sense. Story 58. A man with too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 18 verse 24, New American Standard Bible. Story 59. My life fell apart. Only one friend stood by me and helped me. We are getting married in a month. Story 60. Yesterday, when I had a mental breakdown, I had no one to call and talk with. Nobody to visit and hang out with. I do not even have a digital version of that. My dad and brother are both dead, and I have not seen my army friends in a decade. My 2 closest friends live farther away than it takes just to stop by and say hi. I feel like I am the only man on earth in my own world right now. Story 61. When I invited everyone I knew to a party I was throwing at my apartment, only 2 people showed up. That is when I realized that I am not liked as much as tolerated. Story 62. Not a specific moment, but I started noticing that my phone literally does not receive non-work related messages for weeks at a time. Story 63. Upper 30s, so not quite there. We had nightly gaming sessions with Discord. Then the moment I mentioned that I had inherited a house, a bike, a car, and a workshop of tools, I noticed they looked at me differently. So yeah, I am too busy with renovations, yard work, future goals, college, and so on. Story 64. Moved to Dallas for work, living in an apartment. About a year in, I had the most severe gout in my knee. It was huge and so painful I couldn't sleep or move. Around 2 a.m., I crawled down 2 flights of stairs, climbed into my truck, and drove with the other foot to urgent care. I was in so much pain that they gave me intravenous drugs, steroids, and sent me home. One of the ladies offered to drive since nobody came with me. I thanked her and drove home to crawl back up the stairs. I'm a grown man, and I teared up because it hurt so much. I realized when I got inside that nobody knew or cared what was going on with me. I've had good friends my whole life, but they are all over the country. It was a very low point. It is liberating to some degree. You can do anything you want. After a while of hitting the ground, you realize you bounce back and can endure an enormous amount of pain and suffering and come out on the other side. I'm happily married now, and it feels wonderful to be cared for. I think I appreciate it more. Story 65. Man, why did you have to go so hard? This stings. It is not particularly comforting knowing I am not alone in feeling so alone. Story 66. When I looked back through the lens of my life, I realized that I put them first every time, planning everything down to a T for events, parties, and adventures. After my divorce and going through mania, depression, psychosis, and a slew of other issues, I was alone. I didn't want to force it anymore and made peace with it. I let them know I have office hours on Thursdays and Saturdays at our local bar, and if they want to catch up, they can. However, I am done trying to connect with the old portions of my life. My memory is a steel trap of information, all just stories to be told one day. Story 67. I got dropped off from a work trip out of town on a Friday and forgot my phone in the truck. I did not realize it until I had started walking into my apartment complex. But when I turned back, the men had already left. That was the moment I realized that if I just left somewhere, no one would know or likely think to care for days. Perhaps I would get a call on Monday, but unless someone on the crew spotted my phone, which was doubtful since it had slipped down between the seats, it would likely have just been a guess he is not making it in today. Weird but whatever moment. This was a couple of years ago, and I have been making strides to change and increase my social circle, but it is not easy. Finding genuine people who are not only interested in what you provide them is a difficult task, and I am not succeeding well. Story 68. I initiated it because I felt I had to do it for my own well-being. I moved, but the telephone lines were stable. Airplanes, trains, and automobiles still worked. However, there was no real effort to connect. Also, Silent Shade worked its way into the picture. I realized that a lot of that was not as real as I once thought. The saying about people coming into your life for a reason, a season, or a temporary pleasure is true. When you step out, learn about yourself, and become independent, you recognize your genuine friends and relationships. You learn that you may no longer like what was, and people and things change. It's okay. Being independent is key to being comfortable in your own skin. You cannot dwell on people being there so much. Life is transient. Accept relationships for what they are today, make good memories, discard the rest, and consider it an experience. Story 69. Text messages. There was a time when I would wake up to dozens of texts. Some meaningful, some funny, but they were there. Now I wake up not to bank text messages telling me what I have spent and how the market is doing. I have my wife and children, though, and they are more important than any friend I ever had. So yes, lonely, but priorities change, and that is okay. Story 70. I am 39, so not in my 40s. I have drifted into loneliness before. I reached out to my old friends and was pulled back into friendship like nothing had happened. I wanted to share this in case you want to reconnect with your old friends. I'm sure they would welcome you back without hesitation. I hope you find a way to feel less lonely. Just reach out and tell them, or you don't even have to mention loneliness if you don't want to. They will probably welcome you back no matter the reason you left. Story 71. My friend group has gotten smaller, with one person leaving 10 years ago because he was too toxic. Another drifted away entirely after his second child was born. So there are 4 left. We are all between 44 and 52 years old. 2 of us are entering the upper middle class, and 2 remain in the lower end. I am the only one who has not been married or in a long-term relationship for over 10 years. I foresee the near future where this group splits along economic lines because half of us simply cannot keep up with others. If I get the job I am interviewing for on Monday, I will be making 2.5 times what my last job paid. I wonder if that will stop the drift, and sometimes I am not sure I want it to. Story 72. When my daughter asked me to list my friends as she was sending out her invitations for a party, I couldn't name one person that I would invite. It made me realize that the friends I had all disappeared when we had children. Story 73. Who says we are alone? Sometimes the best thing you can do is get away from close friends who refuse to grow up or face the inevitable challenges life throws at us. Few things are more sad than people in their 40s still behaving like they are some kind of baller. Story 74. Not in my 40s, but now I realize why my father always wants me to go to the movies and baseball games with him. Story 75. 40s? I was a loner by 30. I can tell you when it happened. On my 30th birthday, I sat alone at a pub having drinks by myself. My family lived in another town on the other side of the country, and my friends had moved away. We had drifted apart. I was having a beer, looking around, and realizing that I had no one to share a drink with. There was no friend I could call to come out and celebrate my birthday. The drinks were on me. It was just me sitting there, a few patrons at the bar, and the bored-looking bartender. Story 76. Once you have attended 7 funerals in a year and endured the worst breakup of your life without anyone checking in on you, with everyone too busy to take your calls, you realize, 32 years old here, I guess I arrived at the party early. Story 77. The only time any of my friends talk to me is to borrow my truck and help them pick something up. I tell everyone I don't have a truck anymore and bought a Toyota Prius. Story 78. I've moved too much and changed jobs too often. In the middle of all that, there I was alone. I can't remember the last time someone asked me to do something together. Story 79. Damn. I'm 45. I've always been more introverted and experienced social anxiety, although people are often surprised to hear this. As a young man, I certainly had more time, energy, and effort to put into socializing. As I've gotten older, had a few children, worked more, and taken on more responsibility, it's become harder. Many friends have drifted away, but I'm not upset with them. I realize it is more my responsibility than anyone else's. But there are times I really miss them. Story 80. When I realized my best friend is Claude Artificial Intelligence, I was overwhelmed. But seriously, when I find something interesting that I want to share, my only connection is my 21-year-old son. Story 81. I realized it at 35 on my wedding day. I was the 4th person in my old friends group to get married, and I was not invited to any of their weddings over the previous 15 years. So I invited none of them to mine. I had a child young, so I was not around as much as I could have been in my 20s, but I was starting to feel abandoned around that time. I only invited my 2 remaining friends to my wedding, along with their partners. One of them left as soon as we finished eating at the reception, and the other gave the worst best man speech imaginable. I had known him for 20 years. We literally grew up together, and his speech lasted 45 seconds. Additionally, I got married in early 2020 when COVID-19 was severe, but the world was still relatively normal. My parents did not want to risk it, so they did not come, nor did my sister or nephew. The only 2 people I had on my side of the chapel disappointed me, and I felt very alone that day. Story 82. I am 39, but it hit me really hard this year on my birthday. No birthday texts outside of family. A few years ago, I was in a band, very active in the local music scene. When I met my wife, we could walk down the local strip, and I would know and say hi to nearly a dozen people in about a quarter-mile stretch. But the band fell apart. It was very messy. A mutual friend of all of ours started ignoring me. My group texts and calls had been ignored for months before that. Then I was alone. I worked remotely and saw no one. I waited for calls, tried reaching out to other acquaintances, but was left unread. So I isolated myself and kept to myself. It has been 3 years, and I don't even recognize who I have become. Story 83. My lifetime Canadian best and only friend has American in-laws on his significant other's side. They are not even real family. She used to babysit for their daughter and has maintained close ties since. The daughter is now an adult, and her new American husband fully supports the Make America Great Again movement. My friend visits them more often than he sees me, no problem. One time he was venting in serious distress that he could not handle the trolling anymore from the husband. I told him, "Not telling you what to do, but I guarantee you I would not stand for that," or something along those lines. The guy would talk about how annexing Canada is a good thing, that the former president could just take it, and there is nothing he can do about it. My friend lashed out in frustration and told me that if he went to war with this guy, he could jeopardize his relationship with his significant other of 15 years because she loves these people that much. I told him she can continue the relationship, but he does not have to subject himself to that. Then he went on to say, "This is why you are alone. You are lonely and going to die alone, etc." Regurgitating some deeply personal stuff I have told him. I was just kind of stunned. I did not even tell you what to do, just said what I would do. We have barely spoken since. He can have his Make America Great Again family. To the people saying quality over quantity, this is one of the downsides of quality. There are few or no backups if there is a fallout. I understand that he did it out of frustration of feeling trapped in this situation, but his comments were too much. I am not easily offended, but that was an act of disrespect too great to ignore. Story 84. Can a man nearly 37 years old answer this question as well? I had a group of close friends in graduate school in the Midwest, but even then I was the odd one out. As people graduated, they got jobs and moved away, and I just kind of hung around. Eventually, the loneliness got to me, and I knew I had to make a change. I got a job in the Boston area in the summer of 2018. About 1.5 years later, before I had developed any social circle outside of my job, the COVID-19 pandemic happened. In 2021, I was broken by losing my first pet and my father within 6 months of each other. I was also dealing with a crisis of confidence at work that deepened my usual depression. I had somewhat recovered by 2023, but then workplace toxicity reached a head. I tried to advocate for some of my junior colleagues. That backfired. The junior colleagues left, the toxic people retaliated against me, and management ignored the situation. That put me into another depression that ultimately drove me into an intensive care program. During that program, I realized I had to quit my job before I could recover, so I did so in January. Thankfully, one of my graduate school friends recommended me for another job that would take me back to the Midwest, although a few hours' drive from where most of my old friends live. The great irony is that in the fall of 2024, I had finally put some time into finding friends in Boston, and I succeeded. I found an awesome Dungeons & Dragons group that I have been meeting with regularly for several months. Now I'm leaving them behind. I will probably continue playing in that campaign remotely, but I will not have a group of friends to see in person. I have to start over again in a new city. I am honestly just exhausted with many aspects of life. I do not want to die or anything. I just wish there were fewer things to juggle. Story 85. When one of our friends committed suicide, nobody invited me to the funeral. That was in my early 20s. Story 86. When my daughter was born, I only had one friend I thought would be her uncle. She will be 4 this year, and they have never met. I am also terrible at maintaining text conversations, and the only time we both had to chat was late at night, which gets really hard to do with a baby and when everyone is trying to maintain their career. I have not had a real deep, "here is what is actually going through my head and heart right now" conversation with anyone, including my wife, in years. Story 87. When you reach your 60s, your once-in-a-lifetime best friends start passing away on a semi-regular basis. You reconnect with people with whom you share many experiences and stories from long ago. This time, it is over a mutual loss and grieving. It is simultaneously wonderful and strange. Story 88. Single. Birthday was a few days ago. Family forgot. Friends forgot. Had no one to talk to. Cried myself to sleep. Story 89. I'm a recently retired police officer and military veteran. I had to cut ties with several of my friends when they became deeply involved in a political movement associated with the Make America Great Again slogan. They fully embraced the movement's supporters and frequently posted on social media. Thankfully, my wife and I have found like-minded friends in our new community. It's a small group, but that's okay. Story 90. I am 38, but it is close enough. My friends hold on to the old days and still act like they are in their 20s. Even worse, some started families and became boring. There was no single moment when I realized it was over. It was just me realizing that I would rather be on my own than hang out with people who did not grow up or people who grew up a little too much for me. Story 91. When I had tickets to a National Hockey League playoff game, I realized I had no one to ask to go with me. I had not hung out with my male friends basically since my children were born. I am slowly getting them back into the circle. It is hard. Story 92. When you run into your buddy's spouse and catch up, she asks if you still talk to Xavier, Yolanda, and Zachary. They do not either, emphasis on they. Just me alone. Story 93. We text all the time, but seeing each other is another story. We go months to a year without seeing each other. Usually, a sporting event gets us to a bar together. I am designing a bar with a television in my backyard to watch the games outside. But really, who is coming? Story 94. Thanks for this post. The responses make me feel less alone because it is difficult. I think we have a tendency to remember good times as they were 20 years ago. It is natural to miss that. However, reality is that everyone has moved on and is living their own lives. If 8 hours a day are for work and 8 hours are for sleep, that leaves 8 hours for everything else. For some reason, despite knowing this is true, I still feel guilty about it. Story 95. It's not that bad. I remember feeling like this when I was about 10 years old. I enjoy friendships for the time that they last and do not cry when they end. Story 96. I realized this at 31. I see acquaintances who call me a friend but never invite me to hang out. When I reach out, the responses are really late. That feels strange. Story 97. Not quite in my 40s, but close. I recently returned home from an extended stay at a remote work camp, and it hit me hard. I had a birthday recently, and not a single person besides my immediate family remembered or messaged me. My friends all have families or are about to have children, so I don't see them much anymore. The person I have been talking to daily for several years on Reddit, and the only person I was excited to hear from, is no longer really talking to me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.